Michael and Sam have just moved to Santa Carla, California. They're about to discover its secret.
Notice anything unusual about Santa Carla yet?
No. It's a pretty cool place. If you're a Martian.
Or a vampire.
When you scream.
So where are you? The flying nun?
I'm your brother, Sammy. Help me!
Stay back! Stay back!
What's happening to me, Star? Get yourself a good sharp steak. Drive it right through his heart.
You're a vampire, Michael. My own brother, a damn blood-sucking vampire. Oh, you wait till Mom finds out, buddy.
When a vampire buys it, it's never a pretty sight.
Michael, they're coming! Oh, shit!
And we're back in the car, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your early Friday evening here with me in New York. Once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Today will mark the 8th entry in our month-long continuing series of Halloween horror. Now, as luck would have it, yesterday's film, my all-time favorite horror movie, Sir Alan Parker's 1987 hugely influential Angel Heart. Today's film is from that same year of 1987, although it was a summer release. You don't really think, or at least I don't think of horror films as far as summer releases. I think more popcorn-munching action movies for summer as opposed to horror. But this film was released in the summer of 1987. I want to say it was released the same day as my single favorite James Bond film, starring my single favorite James Bond, Timothy Dalton, in The Living Daylights. But today's film is Joel Schumacher's rip-roaring The Lost Boys. Now, last week I mentioned the film, I discussed as part of the Halloween horror series, An American Werewolf in London, John Landis's, I still think to this day, the greatest werewolf movie to ever come out of Hollywood. That was a film which blended comedy with horror in a way where there are certain people that will call An American Werewolf in London a comedy with horror film elements. Then there are people like me that will say, no, it's a horror film with comedy elements. The Lost Boys is a horror film with comedic asides. And there are whole stretches, whole sequences of the film that are played for laughs. Just as in An American Werewolf in London, you can point to entire chunks of the film and say, Landis is trying to get the audience to laugh, even though horrendous, horrifying things have just happened, 3 minutes ago in the movie. Now we're going for laughs. A naked American man stole my balloons. The Lost Boys has moments of genuine fear and dread and terror. And then it has just laugh out loud scenes with line readings expertly delivered from the entire cast, and everyone in this movie is great. Diane Wiest, when this film was shot, she had not yet won her Oscar, well, her first of her 2 Oscars. But she hadn't yet won the Oscar for Hannah and Her Sisters. Hannah and Her Sisters was completed, but she won the Oscar March of 1987, April, whatever the Oscars of that year were. But The Lost Boys was shot before that. So she, in this movie, was not Oscar-winning actress Diane Wiest. She was just a terrific, very distinctive-looking performer, attractive but not movie star. You wouldn't necessarily say movie star looks, whereas, for example, Barbara Hershey, who plays her sister in Hannah and Her Sisters, Barbara Hershey had more what you would call conventional, kind of glamorous movie star looks. She had a very golden era look to her, Barbara Hershey. But Diane Wiest in The Lost Boys, it would be easy to overlook her performance. Somebody like me who was already a fan, I think she's fantastic because she plays the mom just as you would expect her to, but there's enough shadings and she brings enough of her kind of personality to the character where it feels like something distinctive. It doesn't feel like a throwaway role of a mom who just doesn't understand. Well, how could she understand that her kids are dealing with fucking vampires? The casting, though, and there are sad elements because the lead in the film is played by the unfortunately very talented but significantly ill-fated and star-crossed Corey Haim. And Corey Haim is someone who was chewed up and spit out by the system. He was taken advantage of. He was sexually assaulted, abused by a lot of people in the business. And there really haven't been any names confirmed, but there have been some big names that were floated around as having compromised him. And his whole life is tragic. He died so young. He was a drug addict. He's been gone. I think that he's been gone for 12, 13, 14 years. But as the lead character in this film, and this movie is interesting also, especially for a horror film, where it has something of a dual protagonist structure. Now, I think that Corey Haim's Sam has the most screen time, but his brother Michael played really well by a terrific actor, Jason Patrick. It's unusual that you have the dual protagonist structure, but both of them, they almost take turns. And you think, okay, well, I guess Michael is the lead. Well, no. Sam is the lead. But the fact that you're not really sure, it almost adds to it because you say, wait, can one of these guys get bumped off? Is it going to be that kind of a movie where we think that we're following this character and it's going to end up being, well, no spoilers. But this is a vampire movie. And vampire movies come into and out of vogue, and as far as Hollywood goes, there were a number of decent vampire films made in the decade of the 80s. Of course, you had the movie The Hunger with David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve. I mean, you talk about a classy production, David Bowie and Catherine Deneuve in a vampire movie. And you had the film called Vamp, which really wasn't very good. And you had a few others. My Best Friend is a Vampire. And Jim Carrey, his first starring role, he was basically college age in Once Bitten, which came out about 2 years before The Lost Boys. Now, Once Bitten is a comedy with some horror film, well, not some, it's a comedy with horror film elements, but Once Bitten exists to make you laugh. The Lost Boys exists to terrify you and make you laugh in equal measure. That's how I've always seen the film. And I remember when The Lost Boys came out, it was the same summer, and I believe that La Bamba had been released a week or so prior. So there were a lot of big movies that were in theaters in that and during that summer. But there was a kid that I played tennis with named Mike. He was a fucking magician. The kid was so good, if you put a frying pan in his hand, he could still play. That's how talented he was at tennis. But he had told me weeks before it came out, I can't wait to see this movie, The Lost Boys. It's a vampire film, but it looks really interesting. And then he saw it, and he shouldn't have seen it. It was a rated R movie. He was like 12. But he saw it, and he absolutely loved it. And there is something to be said for targeting a specific film. It doesn't have to be horror, but targeting a specific film, wanting to see it, looking forward to it, let's say for 6 weeks, could even be more, like in the case of the Blair Witch Project, where I was looking forward to it for like 8 months. But when you finally see it, it hits the mark, and it at least matches expectations, if not exceeds it. And I think that this kid, Mike, The Lost Boys was even better than he expected. So I did not see The Lost Boys in theaters, but it was a movie that was on my radar. Enough people I knew did see it in theaters and said, no, you gotta watch this movie when it comes to good old VHS. So as soon as it hit VHS, I rented it. And I thought it was phenomenal. This was one of the best horror films I'd ever seen. Now, to me, it's not pure horror in the manner, because I still considered American Werewolf in London to be probably the scariest movie that I had ever seen up to that point. But The Lost Boys, the performances are strong. Man, Kiefer Sutherland, what an incredible talent. What an incredible talent. And Kiefer has talked about his role in this film. And from the career perspective, I thought it was really interesting what he had to say. he contrasted his character of David, who appears to be the head vampire of this group of, well, they seem to be kids. They look like they're late high school, early college age, but in fact they could be, 100 and we don't even know how old they are. Maybe they're 150 years old. They just have the eternal youthful appearance. Hence the Lost Boys, the kids who don't grow up, the Peter Pan, the Captain Hook, all of that kind of mythology. But Kiefer Sutherland talked about and contrasted the character of David, who is a vicious, he's a fucking vampire, he's a killer. He talked about this, though, and contrasted his character of David with the character of Ace that he plays in Rob Reiner's really terrific, speaking of vampires, Stephen King, Salem's Lot himself, in Stephen King's short story Stand By Me, which is it's a horrifying story, but it is not a horror story. Kiefer Sutherland said, as much as the character of David in The Lost Boys, he is a frightening character. He is not somebody that anybody should ever have to meet. I hope you never meet this kind of person or this kind of creature, being. But he felt that the character of the character of Ace in Stand By Me was worse. He said that's a human being who has zero redeeming qualities. He said the character of David, yes, he's a brutal killer, but he appears to have something approaching the slightest inkling of a conscience. He's not just randomly killing. He actually has a process. And the character of Michael, who kind of falls under his wing, under his spell, that's the Jason Patric character, he doesn't really want to kill him. We think he does, but he doesn't. He just wants him to be part of the group. So what Kiefer was arguing is that the character of David, despite being the undead, actually has more humanity than the human character he had played in his previous film, Stand By Me. And I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but I get where he's coming from. But this film follows the standard unfolding of a creature feature, whether it is David Naughton in American Werewolf in London, not believing that he's a werewolf or that he's going to turn into a werewolf. In this film, you have Michael coming into contact with this gang of vampires and not believing that he's being transformed into one himself. So the typical horror film, going back to the days of the Universal horror, whether it was Dracula, whether it was the Wolfman, whether it was the Mummy, whether it was Frankenstein, there are certain elements that exist in these movies. Now, in The Lost Boys, this does follow what is called, and I'm not going to say what I call because it's not me, it was Noel Carroll in his book, The Philosophy of Horror. Now, it's very specific, the philosophy of horror, in the thought process of this explanation of horror. There must be a supernatural component. There must be a non-naturally occurring sequence of events for it to be a true horror film. And in The Lost Boys, and the thing is, to be full, complex discovery plot. Onset, discovery, confirmation, confrontation, just for reference. In The Lost Boys, onset is there are missing children, and we see evidence of some kind of, we don't know it's vampire activity if we've never seen the film, but we see evidence of some kind of supernatural killing taking place. Discovery of a supernatural killing, which the police would always think is routine, taking place. Confirmation is tricky. Confirmation comes when a character in the story who rejects the idea that something supernatural is taking place. For example, Al Dillon, Carl Weathers' character, and a great performance by the late, great Carl Weathers, he is the one character that does not accept that there is an extraterrestrial or some other supernatural being killing them. He remains convinced for 90-some% of the movie, there's a couple of guys running around in his jungle, we got to take him down. Once he is convinced, when he sees it, that's the confirmation, and in that movie, the confrontation does not really involve Carl Weathers in a conventional sense. But in the movie The Lost Boys, the confirmation comes very, very late. In fact, it comes with maybe 5 minutes left in the movie, and that is exceedingly unusual for a horror film. It just is. So you've seen tons of horror movies with the complex discovery plot that I just described. You just didn't call it that. It doesn't matter what you call it. The idea is that so many of these movies follow this particular path to scare the audience and to have characters where we want to shout, "What the hell's wrong with you? What do you think is going on here?" Well, in the world of this film, the aforementioned Diane Wiest as the mom, she is the one character who, it's not even that she needs to be convinced, but there is nothing in her entire existence that would lead her to believe that something of supernatural origin is taking place right in her shitty town of Santa Carla, the murder capital of the world. Why is it the murder capital of the world? Because it's crawling with vampires. You know, this is what I like to say, nail, meat, head. 1 + 1 = 2. It's not the murder capital of the world for some other reason. You know, it's the murder capital of the world because of all the damn vampires. Now, The Lost Boys also has a kind of bizarre love triangle component with Jamie Gertz, who was, you know, again, another one who looked like she was going to be a bigger star than she was. She still had a terrific career. But Jamie Gertz was in this movie, and she was also in a very, very difficult film based on Bret Easton Ellis's best-selling novel, Less Than Zero, which contains what I believe to this day to be the single finest performance of Robert Downey Jr.'s career as a potential terminal drug addict. Let's just put it that way. And Jamie Gertz in this movie plays a character who goes by Star, and she also appears to be kind of with this gang of vampires, which they just look like wild kids. If you didn't know it, you wouldn't necessarily say, "Oh my God, I'm scared." So she seems to be with David, the Kiefer Sutherland character, but they're vampires. Is there really a romance? Like, what do we, and the movie Interview with a Vampire, which I'm not really a fan of, kind of gets into that. The vampires have sex. What do they do? The movie doesn't go down that particular road here, but Michael falls for her, Star. And there is some discussion that she's supposed to turn him, that he's supposed to be her first, and then they'll all be one big happy biker gang family, I guess. But there's still more going on in this story than we think. The character of the grandpa of the two kids, basically the setup is that you have a single mom, that's Diane, and her sons, Michael and Sam, move to this town, Santa Carla, to be with her father. She has not improved her standing by any measure in her divorce. But we do get the idea. The father isn't really talked about very much, but both boys love their mother. This is not a dysfunctional family situation. There's dysfunction because of the story itself about all the vampires and all of the horrible things that are going on. But these boys love their mother, and she loves them. This is not, Mary Tyler Moore, ice cold and ordinary people. This is not that kind of story. But they move there, and then the shit hits the fan. And we get the idea, even the first time through, and this is a very mild spoiler, we get the idea that there's more going on with the grandfather, played really well by the late Bernard Hughes. Man, is he good in this movie. And he was a TV star. He did a lot of other stuff. But his line readings are absolute gold in this film. And then you have Edward Herrmann, another really solid actor who's been, in Hollywood. He was in Overboard same year with the original Overboard with Kurt Russell and Goldie Hawn. They always look great together, Kurt and Goldie, even as far back as then. They were already together. That's 37 years ago. They kind of fell in love when they made the movie Swing Shift in 84. That's a Jonathan Demme film, which was taken away from him, and that's a whole other story. But Edward Herrmann plays a video store proprietor who becomes friends with Lucy. That's the Diane Wiest's character. And Edward Herrmann has such a grounded screen presence. He comes across like a real person. Like, this really is a guy who owns a video store on the Santa Monica, I think it's the Santa Monica Beach Boardwalk, if I'm not mistaken, in real life. He comes across as a real person who is single, and he's very much interested in pursuing a romance with Diane's character. And their kind of tentative romance develops in a very natural way. And the kids think, and when I say the kids, in this case, Sam because of what's going on with his brother. And then the Frog Brothers, played by the other Corey Feldman, who's still around, and man, has he been through the ringer. Man, he's just, you feel so bad for him because he was abused also, but he managed to survive. And the other actor, Jamison Newlander, as Edgar and Alan Frog, the Frog Brothers. So there are entire sequences in this film, played for laughs, where the boys try to prove that Edward Herrmann's character is a vampire. Max is his name. That he's actually not just a vampire, but he's the head vampire. And there's a lot of laughs. They try to surprise him with garlic. They try to surprise him with this and that and the other thing. And every one of their plans just sort of blows up in their face. And it's like, you know what? This guy, he likes garlic. How the fuck could he be a vampire if he can eat garlic? You throw a little bit of garlic on a vampire, they're going to burn up. You know, that's basically the idea. But the film builds to a really incredible last act. And there are numerous moments where Joel Schumacher, as a filmmaker, and does something that you normally don't do in this kind of movie, where he gives the audience moments to breathe. And those pauses in this film increase the suspense. They get us even more on the edge of our seat because they're screwing around, they're getting holy water, they interrupt a confirmation ceremony or a communion, and it just, the sense of dread and anticipation, knowing that some really terrible stuff is gonna go down soon, as soon as it's sundown. The suspense is almost unbearable for, let's say, the last 20 minutes. And even when it's over, there's still another potential gut punch and more suspense. Now, the film is very well shot and edited. I believe he was an Oscar-winning filmmaker. Michael Chapman did the cinematography. Just amazing the way he shoots colors, the way he shoots day, the way he shoots night. I mean, this is one of the masters, one of the 10 great cinematographers. Many people would put him in the top 10 all time. You know, he's up there with guys like Robert Richardson, Owen Roizman, Conrad Hall, Caleb Deschanel. Michael Chapman was an absolute boss. The movie has this incredible climax, still has a few humorous beats, but when it's over, we might chuckle a little bit, but, and this isn't really a spoiler, you might feel a little bit of relief because it is so pressurized. There is so much stressful stuff taking place that you almost want it to be over because you don't know how much you can take. And there aren't that many movies I can say that about where it just keeps coming at you. It just keeps coming at you. Just as the vampires are difficult to kill, well, Sam and Michael and the Frog Brothers are also difficult to kill. And there is a terrific twist towards the end of the movie, a little bit of a sleight of hand, a little bit of misdirection that I think will fool almost every first-time viewer. Now, I know The Lost Boys has been on Max, what used to be HBO Max. I don't know that it's ever been streaming free on Netflix. It was free on Prime, and it's been free on Tubi. I don't know. I haven't looked this up. I'm not sure if it's free on any streamers as we speak, but this is yet another movie. If you haven't seen it, you will be gobsmacked by how much fun it is and how scary it is. And you will laugh and you will cover your eyes in almost equal measure. This is a genuinely great horror film that isn't necessarily, at least for the first hour and 15, it isn't as difficult to watch as a horror classic such as The Exorcist, such as Texas Chainsaw, such as The Blair Witch Project. But the movie gathers momentum and will absolutely scare the crap out of you. The Lost Boys, the 8th entry in our month-long series, Halloween Horror, directed by Joel Schumacher and starring Corey Haim, Jason Patrick, Kiefer Sutherland, Diane Wiest, Bernard Hughes, Edward Herrmann, Jamison Newlander, and a really strong Corey Feldman. Oh, and how the hell could I forget the great Kiefer Sutherland. This has been episode 330 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. As you can see, it's getting dark, so here come the vampires. I better finish up soon. But if you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others on which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Until then, burn rubber does not mean warp speed. Peace.